In this video, I want to talk about cell membrane structure. So when we look at the cell membrane, you can see there's a lot of stuff there. There's all these phospholipids, there's this cholesterol, there's these proteins, and the term we use to describe the cell membrane, it's also sometimes called a plasma membrane, is a fluid mosaic model. Now fluid because these phospholipids kind of float around, they're very flimsy and almost water-like. But a mosaic, when we say mosaic, you think about art. You think about taking a bunch of tile pieces or glass pieces and kind of putting them into an overall design. So creating a bigger design from a bunch of smaller pieces. And that's kind of what we're doing with the cell membrane, right? So we can see that the majority of the cell membrane are these tiny little phospholipids. They've got the polar heads, the fatty acid tails, and they are selectively permeable. They let small molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide in and out. They don't let big molecules like sugars, proteins, hormones in and out, but they do allow water, carbon dioxide, and some small molecules. So we say they are selectively permeable. Then within there we have these cholesterol molecules. You can see cholesterol, they're like steroids, they're a ringed lipid. Because they're lipids, they're nonpolar, they stick to those fatty acids and they help bind them together. They give them a little bit of structure. And they're also fairly strong, so they provide some strength and flexibility binding those phospholipids together. So cholesterol serves a role in there by helping to bind together this liquidy phospholipid bilayer and give it some strength and flexibility. And then we can see there are some other things on here. You can see a glycoprotein. Glyco means sugar. Well, this is a sugar chain up here, and it's attached to this purple thing, which is a protein. So glycoproteins are a sugar or carbohydrate protein combination or complex. There's also others similar. Here's another sugar or carbohydrate chain attached to two fatty acids, and that's called a glycolipid. And they serve an important role. They allow cells to sort of recognize other cells, self cells, as friendly. Okay, so those are a couple important components of the cell membrane. And again, just a quick review. Phospholipid bilayer. Why does it form this bilayer like a sandwich? Well, it does that because these phosphate groups on the outside and inside are polar, and they are attracted to the watery internal and external environment of the cell. The inside, these fatty acids are nonpolar, water-hating, hydrophobic, so they're going to tend to want to associate with other nonpolar lipids on the inside. Okay, now let's talk about some of the proteins that are found in cell membranes. Okay, so you can see in this membrane, you can see that there's a protein and it's moving something through. So maybe these are salt ions like potassium or sodium that can't pass through the membrane by themselves because of their charge. Or maybe these are sugar molecules that need to be moved through the membrane. Whatever it is, proteins allow things to move through the membrane that cannot pass through by simple diffusion. So one role of proteins in the membrane is transport, moving things through. Other membranes, not so much the cell membrane, but internal membranes, especially in the mitochondria and the chloroplasts, have a lot of enzymes in them. So you can see here's an active site, and it is allowing a chemical reaction to occur. Right? Enzymes lower the activation energy needed and allow chemical reactions to occur. So in a lot of internal cell membranes, we have enzymatic activity. They're full of enzymes and a lot of chemical reactions occur there. On the outside, the external cell membrane, we have other proteins that bind to certain chemical signals called hormones. And when they bind to them, they will then send a signal inside. So these hormones can't pass through the membrane, but they can bind to a cell receptor, a protein receptor, which then initiates a response. Maybe this is adrenaline and this is a heart cell and it's binding to that adrenaline and it's telling the heart cell, okay, beat faster. We got some adrenaline in here, we need to increase the heart activity. So that's called signal transduction. It basically means taking a signal from outside and sending it inside the cell. Some other functions of proteins are they can help bind cells together. That's called intercellular joining. So to form a mass or a level of organization called tissue, cells have to be bound to other cells. Like we said here, here's a protein attached to a carbohydrate. That's called a glycoprotein, which again allows us to recognize our cells as self. So examples of glycoproteins are the A protein, the B protein. If you have neither of those, you have O, which is neither A or B protein on your blood cells. So blood types are examples of glycoproteins on our blood. And then the last thing, you can see this protein is bound to this thing out here. That's called an extracellular matrix. And in here it's bound to the cytoskeleton, the microfibules that make up the cytoskeleton. And basically it allows the internal cytoskeleton to bind to the membrane and also the cell to bind to the sort of external proteins that again hold the cell where the cell needs to be. So those are some functions of membrane proteins, and this is just a quick overview of some of the parts of the cell membrane and how they function together for the overall design of the cell membrane.